What if the very thing you've been calling destiny is actually a habit, not a force outside you? Not luck. Not timing. A habit. Think about it. Every disappointment you've expected somehow found you. Every fear you secretly carried seemed to leave fingerprints on your life. And every time something beautiful finally arrived, it often appeared the moment you stopped chasing it. Most people see these moments and call them coincidence. They're not. Because beneath every result, every relationship, every opportunity, there is an invisible signal being broadcast long before anything appears in physical reality. A signal made of your expectations, your assumptions, your emotional baseline, your deepest unconscious beliefs. The strange part is that most people spend their entire lives transmitting a frequency they never consciously chose. A frequency inherited from old experiences, forgotten wounds, and stories that became so familiar they started feeling like truth. And the universe, like a perfect mirror, keeps reflecting that signal back, not because it is judging you, not because it is testing you, but because it can only respond to what you consistently embody. Tonight, we're going deeper than motivation. We're going beneath positive thinking, beneath manifestation techniques, beneath everything you've been told about attracting the life you want. Because there is a hidden moment that exists between who you've been and who you're becoming. A silent doorway. Most people pass through it without ever noticing, but the ones who learn to recognize it discover something extraordinary. They stop chasing reality, and reality begins moving toward them. If you're ready to understand why that happens and how to consciously create it, stay with me, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you see yourself, your past, and the future that is already trying to find you. There is a moment in every person's life that almost nobody notices. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself. There is no voice from the sky telling you that everything is about to change. It appears quietly, a moment so ordinary that most people mistake it for nothing. And yet, that moment has the power to alter the entire direction of your life. The strange thing is that it usually arrives right after disappointment, right after the text never comes, right after the opportunity disappears, right after life refuses to become what you hoped it would become. At first, the mind reacts the way it always has. It searches for reasons. It searches for blame. It searches for proof that something is wrong, and the old stories begin speaking. Maybe it wasn't meant for me. Maybe people like me don't get what they want. Maybe this is just how life is. The voice sounds familiar because you've heard it for years. But here's what most people never realize. That voice is not reality. It's memory. It's the past trying to survive inside the present. Every fear you've repeated, every disappointment you've carried, every conclusion you've accepted about yourself, all of it creates a lens, and eventually, you stop seeing life. You start seeing the lens. Imagine wearing dark glasses for 20 years. After a while, you forget they're there. You assume the world itself is dark. That's what unconscious programming does. It becomes invisible precisely because it's always with you. And this is why so many people feel trapped inside repeating cycles. Different faces, different places, different years, the same emotional experience, the same frustration, the same feeling that something keeps blocking them. But the block was never outside. The block was the lens, because life does not respond primarily to what you say you want. It responds to what you expect. Think about that. Expectation is one of the most powerful forces in human existence, not because it magically changes reality, because it changes you. And once you change, reality begins responding differently. A person expecting rejection enters every conversation differently than someone expecting connection. A person expecting failure walks into opportunity differently than someone expecting success. The difference is subtle. A tone of voice, a posture, a decision, a hesitation. A risk taken, a risk avoided. Tiny things, almost invisible, yet those tiny things eventually become an entire life. This is why your frequency matters, not because you're sending mystical signals into space, but because your state determines what version of reality you can access. Fear creates one reality, trust creates another, scarcity creates one reality, abundance creates another. The external world may appear unchanged, but the internal observer has changed, and that changes everything. There is a powerful question I want you to ask yourself right now. Who would I be if I stopped expecting disappointment? Not pretending, not forcing positivity, honestly. Who would you become if the old prediction disappeared? If the future was no longer being filtered through old pain? Because that version of you already exists, not in some distant future, right now. Hidden underneath years of conditioning, waiting. And this is where the real transformation begins. Not when circumstances change, not when money arrives, not when the relationship appears, not when the world finally gives you permission. Transformation begins the moment you become aware of the lens, because the instant you can see the program, you are no longer completely controlled by it. Awareness creates distance, distance creates choice, and choice creates a new future. Most people spend their entire lives trying to change what they see. The rare few learn to change the one who is seeing, and once that happens, something extraordinary starts to unfold. The doors that looked locked begin revealing handles. The paths that looked impossible begin revealing openings. The opportunities that seemed absent begin appearing everywhere. Not because the universe suddenly changed its mind, because for the first time, you're seeing what was always there, and that is where the chase begins to reverse. Not out there. Inside you, because the moment your inner signal changes, reality starts answering a different version of your name. The moment your inner signal begins to change, something unusual happens. At first, it doesn't look like success. It doesn't look like manifestation. It doesn't even look like progress. In fact, for many people, it looks like chaos, because the old version of you does not disappear quietly. The beliefs that have guided your life for years do not surrender without resistance. They fight to survive, and they fight in the only place they can, your mind. Suddenly, the doubts become louder, the fears become sharper, the old stories return with unexpected force, and you assume something has gone wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the resistance itself is evidence that something is changing? Think about a room that has been dark for decades. The moment light enters, the darkness becomes visible, not because there is more darkness, because there is finally enough light to see it. The same thing happens within you. The frequency you've lived in for years starts losing its grip, and for the first time, you become aware of the patterns that were secretly running your life. The need for approval, the fear of failure, the fear of being seen, the fear of not being enough. They rise to the surface, not to punish you, to leave you. But most people misunderstand this stage. They think awareness means they have failed. They think seeing the fear means becoming the fear. They think noticing the wound means they are the wound. They couldn't be more wrong, because awareness is proof that you are beginning to separate from the pattern. You cannot observe something and be completely trapped inside it at the same time. The observer is always larger than the thing being observed. Read that again. The observer is always larger than the thing being observed. The fear feels enormous, but the awareness noticing the fear is bigger. The doubt feels powerful, but the consciousness witnessing the doubt is more powerful. And this is where true freedom begins. Not when fear disappears, but when fear stops making decisions for you. Imagine standing at the edge of a familiar road. You've walked it thousands of times. Every disappointment led here. Every setback led here. Every rejection led here. The road is comfortable because it is known. You know exactly where it goes. You know exactly how it ends. And that's the problem. The old frequency always leads to the old reality. No matter how much you wish for something different, no matter how many books you read, no matter how many affirmations you repeat, if the path remains the same, the destination remains the same. This is why transformation requires courage. Not dramatic courage, not heroic courage, quiet courage. The courage to choose differently when nobody is watching. The courage to trust before evidence appears. The courage to remain open when the old self wants to close. Because every new reality begins as an invisible decision, long before it becomes a visible result. The world teaches us to believe after we see proof. But the deepest changes happen in reverse. First comes the decision, then comes the evidence. First comes the frequency, then comes the reflection. This is why some people seem almost magnetic. They are not forcing life. They are aligned with it. They walk differently, speak differently, respond differently, not because they are better than anyone else, because they are no longer carrying the same internal resistance. And resistance is expensive. It costs energy. It costs opportunities. It costs possibilities. Most of all, it costs presence. You cannot fully receive life while constantly defending yourself from it. You cannot experience abundance while preparing for loss. You cannot experience connection while expecting abandonment. The nervous system cannot move toward and away from something at the same time. Eventually, one direction wins, and for years, perhaps without realizing it, you've been moving away from the very things you wanted most. Not intentionally, not consciously, simply because the old signal was stronger than the desire. But now something is changing. You are beginning to see the signal. You are beginning to hear the hidden story beneath the surface. And once you hear it, you can never completely unhear it, because a new awareness has entered the room. A new possibility, a new version of yourself waiting just beyond the limits of who you thought you were. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper, because there is one final illusion that keeps people trapped in the old frequency. An illusion so convincing that most never question it, yet the moment it dissolves, everything changes, not gradually, fundamentally. And that's the moment reality begins responding to you in a completely different way. There is one final illusion that keeps people trapped, an illusion so old, so familiar, that most never think to question it. The belief that your life begins when something arrives, when the money comes, when the relationship appears, when the opportunity finally finds you, when the future becomes different than the present. Until then, you wait, you postpone your peace, you postpone your confidence, you postpone your sense of wholeness. You tell yourself that fulfillment is somewhere ahead, hidden behind a condition that has not yet been met, and without realizing it, you place your power in the hands of a future that does not exist. This is the great deception, because the future had never created your frequency. Your frequency creates the future. The person who becomes magnetic does not wait for life to improve before feeling complete. They become complete first, not perfect, not finished, complete. There is a difference. Perfection says, I will be enough when nothing is missing. Wholeness says, I am enough even while I continue to grow. One creates pressure, the other creates power, and the universe responds differently to each. Think about the sun. It does not beg the world to notice it. It does not chase. It does not convince. It simply shines because shining is its nature, and because it shines, everything around it is drawn into its field. Most people spend their lives acting like the moon, desperately trying to borrow light from somewhere else. Validation, achievement, approval, recognition. They search endlessly for something outside themselves to illuminate what already exists within. But the moment you stop seeking your light and start embodying it, everything changes. The chase ends. The attraction begins. This is why some of the most extraordinary transformations happen quietly. No announcement, no dramatic breakthrough, just a person waking up one morning and realizing they no longer need permission to become who they already are. The fear still visits, but it no longer rules. The doubt still speaks, but it no longer decides. The old stories still knock, but they are no longer invited inside. And slowly, almost invisibly, reality begins rearranging itself. The people who once ignored you suddenly notice you. The opportunities that felt impossible begin appearing. The answers you've searched for seem to arrive from nowhere. But they didn't come from nowhere. They came from a reality you were finally able to perceive. A room that was always there. A door that was always there. A possibility that was always there, waiting for your frequency to match it. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all this is that nothing was ever wrong with you. You were never broken. You were never missing some secret ingredient. You were never abandoned by life. You were simply operating from a signal you did not consciously choose. A signal shaped by old experiences, old fears, old conclusions. And now, for the first time, you can choose differently. Not once. Every day, every moment. Every time the old program asks you to shrink. Every time fear asks you to retreat. Every time doubt asks you to forget who you are. You can choose again, and again, and again, until the new signal becomes your nature, until trust feels more familiar than fear, until possibility feels more natural than limitation, until abundance feels more real than lack. And one day, perhaps sooner than you think, you'll look back at the person you used to be, the one who chased, the one who forced, the one who waited for life to begin, and you'll feel gratitude, because that version of you carried the lessons that brought you here. But you'll also realize something extraordinary. The thing you were searching for was never running from you. It was waiting for you to become the version of yourself capable of receiving it. So if there is one truth to remember after tonight, let it be this: you do not need to force the river to flow. You do not need to chase what belongs to you. You do not need to become someone else to deserve a different reality. Your task is simpler. Become conscious of the signal you are broadcasting. Choose it deliberately, protect it consistently, and trust it long enough for reality to answer. Because the moment your frequency changes, your world begins changing with it. Not because the universe suddenly notices you, but because, for the first time, you finally notice the universe that has been reaching toward you all along. And when that happens, the chase is over. The alignment begins.